May the Lord give you peace, brothers, and welcome to the second day of the retreat. I only hope and pray that the first day was good, that you did get time to sit with the Word and the Lord. As I suggested, hope you got these 45 minutes of sessions in the morning and evening as well. On the second day, we keep up our general theme of being joyful witnesses of the gospel. That is what we want to be. Perhaps that is what we profess to be. And we want to ignite the same spirit even today as we do this retreat. I would like to read to you first a reading from the prophet Jeremiah chapter 2 and then make my reflections for this day. Jeremiah chapter 2. This word of the Lord came to me. Go, cry out this message for Jerusalem to hear. I remember the devotion of your youth, how you loved me as a bride, following me in the desert, in a land unsown. Sacred to the Lord was Israel, the first fruits of his harvest. Should anyone presume to partake of them, evil would befall them, says the Lord. Listen to the word of the Lord, O house of Jacob, all you clans of the house of Israel. Thus says the Lord. What fault did your fathers find in me that they withdrew from me, went after empty idols and became empty themselves? They did not ask, where is the Lord who brought us up from the land of Egypt, who led us through the desert, through a land of wastes and gullies, through a land of drought and darkness, through a land which no one crosses, where no man dwells? When I brought you into the garden land to eat its goodly fruits, you entered and defiled my land. You made my heritage loathsome. The priests asked not, where is the Lord? Those who dealt with the law knew me not. The shepherds rebelled against me. The prophets prophesied by Baal and went after useless idols. Therefore will I accuse you, says the Lord, and even your children's children I will accuse. Pass over to the coast of Kittim and see. Send to Kedar and carefully inquire, where has the like of this been done? Does any other nation change its gods? Yet they are not gods at all. But my people have changed their glory for useless things. Be amazed at this, O heavens, and shudder with sheer horror, says the Lord. Two evils have my people done. They have forsaken me, the source of living waters. They have dug themselves cisterns, broken cisterns that hold no water. On the second day, as we continue to reflect on our general theme, joyful witnesses of the gospel, for the second day first talk, I have this reading from prophet Jeremiah. I want to talk to you about the two evil or the sin that the Lord speaks of. Forsaken the living fount or living water and digging a leaking cistern or tank. First, I would like to share with you something that I watched. There is a documentary movie called Chasing Happiness as Brothers. Chasing Happiness as Brothers. This is a documentary movie on Jonas Brothers. These are the three famous Jonas brothers from America. One of them is Nick Jonas, who married our Indian lady Priyanka Chopra. This story is not about Priyanka Chopra and Jonas, but it's about these three brothers. The three brothers were all known for music talent. From the early childhood, they were good musicians. They would write songs, lyrics, they would compose, they would sing, and later they learned to play and they would play all instruments. They even began their own band. They wrote their songs, they composed. Seeing their talent, great producers came forward and helped them to take it forward. They enjoyed this moment naturally in their life. Like they were successful very early in their life. They enjoyed being brothers most of all. They worked together as brothers. It was like they could not do anything without each other. They experienced tremendous success and popularity Yet they remained humble. They knew that there is a long way to go. And then some kind of thought came to them, especially Nick, their younger brother, who said that he wants to perform by himself solo. He doesn't want to accompany his other two brothers. He wants to try out. He wants to leave them. This came as a shock to both of them. For some time they went their own ways. They were hurt, they were sad, they were lonely. Yet they continued to perform. But they recount that they were never happy when they parted their ways. They never had the energy of what they were as together as brothers. They performed, but they were never satisfied. Something was terribly lacking in them. Then one day, Nick opened up the topic. Meanwhile, they as a family with parents went through lots of difficulties. Their father was a pastor in the local church, but had to resign because of many problems. But the moment Nick opened up the topic that they were not normal without each other, without performing together, and that it is good if they come together as brothers again and perform as a band, a new light dawned on them. They came together, and the rest is history, as they say. These three boys were born to a pastor's family. So naturally, they were brought up very religiously. They would go to the church regularly, sing there the songs and assist their father and mother. But they grew up performing stage programs and writing non-religious songs and secular songs basically. They became popular. Each was talented. But only when they were together, there was energy, satisfaction, meaning, and joy and happiness. The parents were happy. This is one such story among many which tells us from an outside the religious world how nice and important it is to appreciate, admire, work, and live with each other. It is important to see in the other as my brother. For we have heard and preached many times that it is the spirit that gives life and not flesh. And it is the spiritual relationship that is stronger than flesh. Yet we are the last one to believe in it. Yet we are the ones to abuse it, first given the opportunity to abuse. It is sad that we do not want to give into this kind of understanding. It is deplorable that we, as brothers of one family, that we who teach others how to be brothers and how to be united, sometimes give up in the first opportunity that comes. And hence, the story of these Jonas brothers is an important story for us today for reference. That when they were together, they were active, joyful, energetic, creative. When they separated, even though they performed, it was not up to the satisfaction. They parted their ways. They thought that individually they were talented and they could do 101 things. But the spirit was missing. Now I would like to talk to you and reflect with you about the reading that we read today from Prophet Jeremiah. Prophet Jeremiah is my favorite prophet for many reasons. But one of the admirable passages is what we read today. How prophet receives the word from God and then a wonderful sharing of the mind of God is kept there. It is like, in a way, what I shared just now, the way the three brothers, Jonas brothers went about. God feels that people have given up on him. They have parted their ways. And now, everybody is a loser. Even God seems to be a loser. Like, without the people that he has chosen, he is nobody. And hence, he brings this word to prophet Jeremiah about his concern, about his love, about the questions that he has about the nature of this people, the attitude of this people. Let's see what this reading tells us today. The chapter 2 of prophet Jeremiah begins with a recalling of the memory. God has a wonderful memory. He has a wonderful memory of what people are. In fact, God remembers the youthfulness of the people of Israel. That when they were youth, they were energetic, they were creative, they had talents, and they were ready to do anything. That is the youthful energy. And it is nice to know, I like this expression for myself. I feel so overwhelmed by this that God remembers. God remembers our youthfulness. God remembers, of course, from the time of our conception, no doubt about it. But for me to know that God remembers me is something overwhelming. And here too, the first instance itself to prophet Jeremiah, God says, I remember. I have a memory. They call it as elephant memory. I remember everything. I remember all that has gone through for my people. I know how my people were in the desert. But what is more, what I remember is how my people were faithful to me. How even in their youthfulness they were devoted to me. How my people were always very close to me. Like other prophets would say, like the loincloth attached to my body, very close. Such is the relationship that God remembers. This is important for us. And now the question to Jeremiah is, how is it that the people don't remember? Have you forgotten all this relationship? It's over? Because you have come of age? Because you have built yourself institutes? It's all over? All the past memory is erased, deleted? So God is reminding to the people of Israel that I remember. The memory is an important aspect here. So the first thing that I want to bring before you is the memory. Do you remember as well? Do you have a memory of what is gone before you? How much God has done to you? How kind, how generous, how provident God has been to you? Do you remember? So one of the exercises perhaps you can do today for your retreat is to remember, to have the memory, to get back the memory, because memories will help us to reorganize ourselves. Like the days of our youth, like the day I was called in to be a friar, like the day perhaps my vocation promoter came to my family, the joy, the excitement, the first time that I came to the seminary, the first time that I moved around with friars, the first time I did so many things as a new candidate, recruit, first time I made my vows, the first time I made my renewal, my final vows, the day I was ordained deacon and priest, then all the things that have gone through formation, so many first times in life. Do you remember the excitement? Do you remember the experience? Do you remember the joy, the energy, the creativity? Do you remember? Do you have this memory? God remembers our youth. God remembers all that we have done, the good and the bad, all the energetic works and all the naughty things we were capable of doing. God remembers. God remembers perhaps how naughty you were, how talkative you were, how disturbing, irritating perhaps you were at home, in the school, in the catechism, know not where. God remembers. And despite that, all that, God still believes in us. And Prophet Jeremiah wants to tell us that our youth days are important because they are remembered by God, because they were special. Our youth days were special. Our younger days were special because we had so much of dreams and plans and energy, creativity, everything that you can think of. So God basically remembers. Psalm 139 says, I know you through and through. You can't escape me. Even if you are going to be in a dark room, darkness is not anymore dark for God. Even if you are to go deep down into the abyss, even God can reach there. So the knowledge of God about us, the memory, the remembrance of God is an important aspect of our spiritual journey. To know and realize that God remembers. God has a fresh memory of us. Who we are, what we were able to do. Remember what we are also possible, our potence to do things in the days to come. So this memory is an important thing. So the first thing that we could recognize for our retreat today on the second day is to remember. To have a good memory of what has gone behind us. And when we talk about memory, yes, we may have memories of good and bad. And some of us, for our own reasons, choose to remember only negative, destructive, hurtful things. And what is more, we are even keeping them for years. It is of no use, honestly, but we are treating it, not just keeping, we are incensing these memories. They don't work well for us, they don't do any good for us, yet we incense them, we keep them safe, we treat them. Remember today what God has been to you. God remembers you. Remember that more than anything else. That in God's memory, you are there. His memory is never full, in other words. You don't need to delete some to add you. No. So God remembers you. The second thing that we recognize in this passage is how God remembers your devotion. Beautiful. The people of Israel had a devotion that is so unique and special. How was the devotion expressed? The reading says, through gratitude, through fidelity, and the love of God. The very typical word in Hebrew is chesed Adonai. The loving mercy, or the mutual faithfulness, or the merciful love. This is the devotion that people had in the beginning. They were in a way totally dedicated to God. They were devoted to God. They gave all that they are, all that they think, their good and the bad, everything to God. So this was an important aspect for God to remember about the people of God, the devotion of the people of Israel. The devotion. What kind of devotions do you have? If I ask you devotions, you will at once say, I have devotion to Sacred Heart, I have devotion to Divine Mercy, I have devotion to Rosary, I have devotion to this saint, that saint. We are talking about external. Is that the devotion? Or does devotion mean little more to you today? A question that I ask you. And what is most? This devotion also brought forth, as Jeremiah would say, people as the first fruits. So it was mutual, in other words. The devotion was mutual. God's love, people's love was mutual. And the result was the people of Israel were treated as the first fruits, choicest fruits. And they were first fruits by choice from God. God makes a choice to have you as his first fruits. So that is something wonderful, amazing. What's most, in the book of Exodus, we see the people of Israel treated as God's portion. My part, it is mine, it's my property. What is most, because of this, they were also treated as the holy people of God. When we talk about holy, we talk about separated, consecrated, kept aside, not to be touched. Kodesh in Hebrew, the holy ones. And the separated, untouchable in a way by others, kadosh. So we have these important aspects of God's choice for us. So by means of God's choice, you are separated, you become holy, you become special, you become a choicest fruit. Now remember, God remembers you, God has a wonderful memory, and God remembers your devotion, which was very mutually fulfilling. Now the third thing is a bomb on the people of Israel. Like, they were so good, they were so mutually beneficial, the relationship was going on so well, and suddenly the people of Israel find their own way. God has a complaint. God recognizes in them two evils. One is they have forsaken the fountain of life. And secondly, they have built cisterns that leak. I would like to bring this to your very special attention today. Like, all the good intentions that we have and all the good that is going on around us, is this something true of us? Forsaking the fountain of life and also building our own cisterns that leak. As religious today, this is an important aspect that we need to take care of. Like, we have come a long way. We have spent many years as religious. We have learned all the tricks of the job. We know how to go about, we know how to evade, we know how to avoid people and still be very presentable. We know how to trick at times. We know how to tell lies. We know how to really go through channels that are really not needed for us. We know how to fool each other. And what is most, sometimes we fool ourselves and becoming the greatest fool on earth. And this is where perhaps we need to pay attention during the retreat. To recognize in us whether, having profited from the fountain of life all through our youth, knowing well how good God is to us because He has called us, there are chances now that slowly, steadily, we have forsaken this fount of life. Now the source of life, the source of our energy, the source of our creativity may not be God at all. Anything other than God, anyone other than God, there are chances. And God realizes, God sees. God sees that when people of Israel started getting settled, they forgot about the one who brought them, one who planted them. Because they are self-sufficient. They have enough things to do. They are busy bodies now. They have no time for prayer. They have no time to set aside something for God. Forgetfulness comes when we think that we are full. Like my father always used to say, a banana starts becoming bitter when the stomach gets full. Otherwise, banana is very good. Our life too. That now that we have learned the trick of the profession or job, it's possible that we have moved away from the fount of life and perhaps are looking for different sources to live our life. That is evil according to Prophet Jeremiah. And it is true of our religious life today. Instead of becoming religious leaders, we are trying to proceed in different ways and trying to make that as our mission. Pope Francis says, we don't have a mission, we are a mission. When we forsake the fount of life, we also give up on what is essential to our life as friars, as religious. And what is worse, when we do not want the fountain of life, that is a spring, we start building tanks to harvest rainwater perhaps, if you have to give the example of today. In those days, the people of Israel would cut a rock and make that as a tank to save the rainwater because water was very little. The rains were always the rains during winter and there was no rainy season as such as we enjoy here. And so whatever the little comes from heaven, there is to preserve. And we can see even today such cisterns, such tanks, water tanks. When the person has stopped going to the spring and has started to build a tank with limited sources or resources, and that too God's indication here is this tank is actually leaking tank, broken. It actually doesn't keep the water. It receives the water but nothing remains because it has a crack. It has leakage. Perhaps this is a wonderful expression of our religious life too. That a time ago, things were wonderful, exciting, very experiential. Whether it's prayer, whether it's community, whether it's work, whether it's poor, it was exciting. And as the time goes, when we are becoming more and more perhaps self-sufficient, whether physically or psychologically, we forget the very source from where we come. And we start building our own safety zones, safety nests. We have our own cozy corners that we have created. We have our own chairs and tables that we have thought that will give us comfort and security. In religious life, this is a grave sin. To know that what I do is the one that gives me comfort and security. So one aspect that we will keep looking at ourselves is whether we have lost our memory, whether we have lost our past, whether we have forsaken the one who has called us our source, and whether we have started creating our own safety zones and secure zones that probably are leaking. Today, we are sad to say, but it's so true, that every religious congregation is facing issues within that are terrible in nature. When we reflect about our own life, we realize that we are given so much investment in terms of education and formation. We still get at the end of the day, if you want to use the word products, that are still broken, that are lonely, that are conflicting, that are not understanding. While we have the same source for our life education, the outcome has been either broken, either lonely, either conflicting, or you name it. I would like to read to you Evangelii Gaudium 86 and conclude it here. In some places, a spiritual desertification has evidently come about as the result of attempts by some societies to build without God or to eliminate their Christian roots. In those places, the Christian world is becoming sterile and it is depleting itself like an overexploited ground which transforms into a desert. In other countries, violent opposition to Christianity forces Christians to hide their faith in their own beloved homeland. This is another painful kind of desert. But family and the workplace can also be a parched place where faith nonetheless has to be preserved and communicated. You and me are God's choicest fruits. Let us not forsake the fountain of living water and build cisterns, tanks that actually leak.